Welcome to Left Africa.
Imagine a national leader, right? They're standing at a podium before their entire country, looking directly into the cameras, and they are declaring total victory in an asymmetric war.
Right.
I mean, a conflict where a massive state-run military is supposedly just crushing these decentralized, hidden rebel factions. And the numbers this leader is citing are absolutely massive.
Oh, yeah.
It paints this picture of flawless, undeniable operational success. But then you have to imagine that during the exact same week, literally hundreds of miles away, heavily armed syndicates are pulling hundreds of hostages out of an enemy cave system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, including pregnant women and teenagers. And they're simultaneously launching these brazen daylight school kidnappings in regions that were, supposed to be completely safe.
It is a profound, almost dizzying contradiction.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is exactly what we are looking at today with this investigative dossier on Nigeria's security crisis.
If we look back to the 2023 campaign trail,
Yeah.
President Bola Tinubu made a very specific, heavily publicized promise. He pledged to re-engineer Nigeria's security architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Like he promised measurable, definitive results to end the terror that had been paralyzing northern communities for years. Now, jump to June 12, 2026.
Yes.
Yesterday.
Just yesterday.
Right. It's Democracy Day, which is this massive national holiday. And the administration rolls out what they call their scorecard for the nation.
And those numbers were, they were staggering.
Staggering is the word. They claimed that in the last 12 months alone, 13,033 terrorists were neutralized. Plus, 11,623 suspected criminals were arrested.
Right.
And then an unbelievable 124,000 militants surrendered.
Yeah. When you look at the rhetoric surrounding those numbers, it is deliberately designed to project absolute, unquestionable state control.
Oh, definitely.
The administration is really using the vocabulary of total victory here by claiming they have degraded the enemy's capacity to that specific granular degree. They are essentially signaling to the domestic public and, international investors that the war is, for all intents and purposes, won.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the moment you start applying basic arithmetic to those claims, the physics of the narrative just completely falls apart.
It really does.
Let's look at the fatalities alone. 13,033 killed in 12 months. If you divide that by 365 days, you are looking at an average of roughly 36 kills every single day, without fail.
36 a day, every day.
Right. That is a staggeringly high fatality rate. Proportionally speaking, that actually outpaces the U.S. coalition's fatality estimates for ISIS at the absolute peak of the air campaigns in Syria and Iraq.
Wow, really?
Yeah. It raises this immediate, mechanical question. How does an underground insurgency even sustain its own existence, let alone carry out new attacks, while bleeding 36 fighters a day?
Yeah, you'd run out of people.
Exactly. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with a gaping hole in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like a logging company claiming they clear-cut an entire forest every single month, but satellite imagery shows the canopy is actually getting thicker.
Right. What's fascinating here is that the logistics of the data fracture even further when you examine that 124,000 surrender figure.
Oh, man. Yeah. That number is just wild.
We really need to visualize the sheer human mass of 124,000 people. That is not a splintered, ragged militia just coming out of the bush. That number represents the equivalent of an entire national army.
Yeah, an entire army.
In fact, 124,000 people is larger than the combined active-duty military strength of several West African nations put together.
But wait, hold on. Let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
Couldn't that figure be bloated by the inclusion of non-combatant family members?
Yeah.
Like if an insurgent fighter comes out of the forest and brings his 3 wives and 8 children with him, does the military just lump them all under the surrendered militant umbrella to pad the stats?
Well, yes, it is highly likely that dependents are being lumped into that figure to inflate the optics. Absolutely.
Right.
However, even if we assume an extreme ratio where, only a tiny fraction are actual combatants and the rest are family members, the physical logistics of processing 124,000 human beings still completely betrays the claim.
Because where do you put them all?
Exactly. A mass defection of that magnitude requires a massive, internationally documented disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration process. You need camps, you need daily food logistics.
Medical screening, too.
Right, medical screening. Yet, the dossier explicitly points out that international observers, including the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross, have reported absolutely no infrastructure, no mass defection events, and no rehabilitation programs operating at anything even approaching that scale.
Wow.
I mean, you simply cannot hide a migrating population of 124,000 people from satellite and drone surveillance.
No, you really can't. And to put a final point on how detached these numbers are, the dossier pulls in the Global Terrorism Index's data for 2024. They estimated that Nigeria's total terrorism-linked deaths for the entire year, and keep in mind that metric includes both civilian casualties and militant deaths combined, was approximately 4,600.
Just 4,600.
Right. So the government is asking the public to believe that overall deaths sat around 4,600, but they somehow unilaterally killed 13,000 militants and processed 124,000 surrenders.
The statistical gap is just a chasm. It really stretches the bounds of operational reality to the breaking point.
So what does this all mean? If the math of the government's total victory is structurally impossible, what is actually happening on the ground?
Well, the reality is very different.
Yeah, and this takes us right back to the events that unfolded this exact same week, right in the shadow of that Democracy Day speech. While the administration was touting its victory scorecard, the Nigerian military was simultaneously conducting a rescue operation in the Sambisa Forest region in Borno State.
Right, that was a major operation.
Yeah, they pulled 360 captives out of a Boko Haram cave system.
Oh.
And the details in the dossier regarding this rescue are incredibly dark.
They really are.
These victims weren't captured enemy combatants. They included pregnant women, teenage girls, and young children. And the analysts note this points directly to an ongoing, entrenched system of forced marriage and sex slavery.
Which, importantly, requires a high degree of territorial security to maintain.
How so?
Well, you cannot hold 360 human beings in a subterranean cave system for extended periods unless you have absolute confidence that your supply lines are secure.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and you'd need to know that the state military cannot reach you easily. It implies a level of entrenchment that totally contradicts the idea of an enemy on the run.
Right. And it isn't just happening in the remote northern forests anymore. The geographical footprint of this crisis is mutating in ways that totally shatter the government's claim of a degraded enemy.
Yes, the southward shift.
Let's jump to late May 2026, literally weeks before the president's speech. There was a major, highly coordinated kidnapping at a school compound in Oyo State. Heavily armed syndicates breached the perimeter and took teachers and students in broad daylight.
In broad daylight.
Yeah. And many of those victims are still missing today. Now, for anyone familiar with the geography, Oyo State is deep in the southwest of the country. Historically, the Southwest has viewed the insurgency as a distant northern problem, confined to places like Borno, Yobe, or Kaduna.
Exactly. And the Oyo kidnapping is arguably the most alarming operational shift highlighted in these sources.
Well, this is alarming.
I think so, yeah. The security analysts in the dossier attribute this southward expansion to what they call the forest corridor theory.
Okay, what is that?
Well, for decades, there have been historical smuggling routes and cattle rustling trails that cut through the country. What we are seeing now is that these militant syndicates are actively terraforming historically protected nature reserves like the Omo Forest and the old Oyo National Park into a contiguous criminal superhighway.
Wow, a superhighway.
Yeah. The thick canopy cover shields them from aerial surveillance, and the lack of state presence allows them to build a highly lucrative kidnapping economy that stretches from the northwest and north-central zones straight down into the southwest.
I want to make sure I'm fully grasping the mechanics of this. So rather than being pushed back or contained by the military, they're essentially using national parks as a protected transit network to franchise their operations into wealthier, previously untouched regions.
That is the exact mechanism, yes. They are exploiting ungoverned, forested spaces to move personnel, weapons, and hostages without ever having to touch a paved road or a state checkpoint.
Which means this isn't a retreating, defeated army. This is a franchise opening new locations in a completely different neighborhood.
Precisely. It's like a CEO claiming their rival is bankrupt while the rival is actively buying up real estate in a new city.
Yes. Great analogy. If an enemy force has the manpower and logistics to secure 360 hostages in a northern cave system, while simultaneously having the bandwidth to open entirely new, highly coordinated fronts in the southwest, they are not on the verge of collapse.
Not at all.
Which forces us to ask the most glaring question of this entire dossier.
Yeah.
If the insurgency is actively franchising and kidnapping teachers in the South, who on earth is signing off on 13,000 dead terrorists?
Right.
How does the military manufacture these massive success numbers, and why hasn't anyone called them out on it internally?
Well, to understand how the data is manufactured, we have to look at the structural architecture, the military's reporting mechanism, which the dossier notes is notoriously opaque.
Opaque is putting it mildly.
Yeah. The military uses a highly flexible 4-tier casualty reporting system to define a quote-unquote neutralized terrorist. The first tier is confirmed kills.
Okay.
This is the traditional empirical standard. Ground troops engage the enemy, bodies are physically recovered, and identities are verified.
Well, that makes sense. That's how you'd expect casualties to be counted.
Right. But the subsequent tiers are where the data gets incredibly malleable. The second tier is suspected kills. Yeah. These are casualties reported from airstrikes or long-range artillery bombardments where ground troops never advance to secure the area, meaning no bodies are ever physically recovered or verified.
I see.
Then the third tier is assumed kills. This relies purely on unverified intelligence or intercepted chatter. And finally, the fourth tier is attrition through surrender.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I see the loophole. The words suspected and assumed are doing all the heavy lifting here.
Exactly.
If you drop a bomb on a patch of forest based on a drone camera spotting movement, you can just draft a report saying dozens of terrorists neutralized and file it away. The word neutralized is just an administrative catch-all.
And independent investigators, such as the security consultancy Beacon cited in the dossier, argue that these second and third tiers routinely account for the vast majority of the military's claimed casualties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there is a massive institutional transparency gap protecting the system. Nigeria's National Bureau of Statistics hasn't published comprehensive independent crime or conflict data since 2023.
Really? Nothing since 2023.
Nothing. The military is essentially operating in an informational vacuum where they are the sole authors and auditors of their own success.
It's like a student grading their own final exam in pencil and refusing to show their work.
That's a great way to put it.
Or like a hospital classifying every single patient whose fever drops as cured, even if the patient actually died of something else, just to ensure their department keeps getting funding.
If there is no independent battlefield monitoring, the entire casualty count is essentially operating on an honor system.
And the funding aspect you just mentioned is critical. There is immense political pressure from the capital down to the field's commanders.
Because of the budget.
Yes. When the military budget is astronomical, generals and field officers are under intense pressure to show a return on investment. Generating high neutralized numbers is the currency of career advancement and budget justification.
Makes sense.
But there is a very dark documented precedent for how this exact reporting mechanism fails civilians.
How so? Like, what actually happens? Well, the dossier references a 2022 investigation by Amnesty International. There was a Nigerian Air Force strike in Borno State that tragically killed at least 10 civilians, including young children.
Oh, that's awful.
It is. However, the military's initial press releases reported that exact same airstrike as a successful mission that had neutralized terrorists.
Oh, man.
Yeah, in a system where the military faces zero external audits, every bandit, suspected criminal, or even collateral civilian casualty can easily be rolled up into that 13,000 figure. Hitting that target becomes an exercise in creative accounting rather than a reflection of actual battlefield supremacy.
When a nation's internal reporting becomes this structurally disconnected from reality, you just can't trust the domestic data anymore.
No, you can't.
You have to look for external indicators like movements by foreign intelligence or international forces to tell you the truth about the country's actual stability. And the dossier highlights a massive external red flag that occurred just months before this Democracy Day speech.
Yeah, the U.S. deployment.
Right. In February 2026, the United States military quietly deployed 100 troops to Nigeria, specifically to provide counterterrorism support and intelligence sharing.
Yes, that deployment was orchestrated through the U.S. Africa Command, commonly known as AFRICOM.
Okay.
And their mandate generally involves providing advanced drone surveillance, signal intelligence, and special operations advisory support to local forces.
Wait a minute, let's follow the logic there. If the Nigerian military is genuinely operating at peak efficiency, like if they're single-handedly degrading the insurgency to the point of killing 36 militants every single day and orchestrating the surrender of 124,000 fighters all on their own, why on earth would the U.S. intelligence community suddenly feel the urgent need to drop special operations forces and advanced surveillance assets into the country?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the implication of that AFRICOM deployment is profound. It strongly suggests that the international intelligence community was looking at the exact same landscape and seeing a security apparatus that was actively deteriorating, not improving.
Exactly.
It implies that despite the domestic claims of 13,000 kills, the traditional military capacity was fundamentally insufficient to contain the mutating threat. And this brings us to the very core thesis of the dossier. You cannot solve a deeply entrenched socioeconomic crisis using purely kinetic military strategies.
Let's define that for a second. When you say kinetic military strategies, you mean relying entirely on traditional lethal force, right? Like dropping bombs, firing artillery, deploying infantry, instead of addressing the actual social rot that creates the fighters in the first place.
Exactly. The kinetic approach treats the symptoms while ignoring the disease. The dossier lays out the devastating structural roots that are fueling this entire conflict. The data shows a 33% youth unemployment rate. And even more alarming, 63% of the entire population is currently living in multidimensional poverty.
And multidimensional poverty isn't just about not having cash in your pocket, right? It means a total lack of access to basic human needs like no clean water, no electricity, no functioning schools, no healthcare.
Precisely. It is systemic deprivation. Now, contrast that profound poverty with this final statistic. The security sector is currently absorbing roughly 25% of the entire national budget.
25%.
Yes, a quarter of the nation's wealth is being poured into bullets, airstrikes, and military contracts without actually delivering safety to the citizens.
So you have millions of young, desperate people with absolutely zero economic prospects living next to massive, ungoverned forest spaces like the old Oyo National Park. I mean, it's the perfect recipe for an illicit economy.
It guarantees the insurgency will never run out of recruits. The kidnapping epidemic has evolved far beyond ideological terrorism.
Right.
It doesn't matter if a fighter believes in a specific religious or political dogma anymore. The insurgency has transformed into a highly organized, multi-billion naira industry. Syndicates are negotiating ransoms, moving vast amounts of illicit cash, and maintaining complex supply chains. Because the root causes the multidimensional poverty and the ungoverned territories remain completely untouched by the military's kinetic airstrikes.
They just keep growing.
Exactly. The insurgency operates effectively as a violently aggressive employer in regions where the state provides nothing.
As we step back and look at the totality of this dossier, the core takeaway here is really a masterclass in how to read between the lines of official government data.
It really is.
When a state apparatus puts a massive number, like 13,000 dead terrorists, front and center, it's designed to act as a smokescreen. It's meant to overwhelm the public with the illusion of control. But understanding the true reality of a conflict requires looking directly at what isn't being talked about on the podium.
Exactly.
It requires looking at the teachers in Oyo State who are still missing today. It requires looking at the fact that the insurgency is actively terraforming national parks into criminal superhighways. And it requires asking why per capita abduction rates are surging and U.S. troops are deploying in the exact same year the government is claiming total victory.
And, as we close, it is important to reiterate our analytical framework for you. The findings from these sources absolutely paint a grim, highly critical picture of the current security architecture and state governance.
Oh, dear.
But our role today was solely to extract the facts provided in the dossier and cross-examine the mechanics of those official statistics. We remain entirely neutral regarding the domestic political actors involved.
Always.
Our focus is on the data and its alignment or lack thereof with the operational reality.
We just follow where the sources lead. And today, the sources map out a truly complex, evolving crisis. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Sort of circling back to that jarring contrast we started with the leader declaring victory at the podium while hostages are pulled from the caves. If a violent insurgency can seamlessly adapt from a fringe ideological terror group into a highly lucrative, decentralized commercial kidnapping franchise with supply chains spanning from the northern forests all the way to the southern states, How does a traditional state-run military even begin to fight an enemy that acts more like a ruthless adapting corporation than a standing army?
That is the defining security puzzle of the modern era.
It really is. It requires a complete rethinking of what victory actually looks like. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.